Hi, I'm Maths Magician, and yes, I am going to show you how to convert decimals to fractions. But first, to understand how this really works, I really recommend you to watch my previous video on decimals. So what it does is it basically introduces you to the idea of decimals if you're not really familiar with them, and take my word, it's really helpful if you want to understand this video. So let's dive into it. How to convert decimals to fractions. First, to convert one thing to another thing, in our case decimals to fractions, we need to have a relation or a similarity between them. Like if you want to convert centimeters to meters, then you have to multiply the value by 100 to convert it to meters. So we have to find a relation like that between decimals and fractions to be able to convert them. And to do that, we need examples. There we go. Okay, 0.25. So that is a decimal. 1/4, that's a fraction. Do these look any similar to you? Like, do they look the same? Do they have the same digits? Probably not, because the decimal has a decimal point while the fraction doesn't. And the fraction has a vinculum or a dividing bar, whatever you like to call it, but the decimal doesn't. And not even the digits are the same. So what's the similarity between them? The similarity might not seem very clear to you yet. So it'll be easier for you to understand if I draw like a picture, and it'll be easier for you to take in. Let's draw or color in the 0.25 in this square and color in the fraction in this square. So for this example, I'm going to have to ask you to think that this whole blue square represents one whole, or 1. And same over here. So let's work with the decimal first. Okay, so now to color in 0.25, all we have to do is color in 2 bars made out of 10 squares in 5 of the little squares, because that would be 2 tenths and 5 hundredths, which is our decimal. Perfect. So that's 0.25 in my big square or my big hole. Now let's do that exact same thing on this square. And now here we're working with 1/4 or 1/4. And to find out how many bars or squares we need to color in, it's because since if this whole square represents one whole and there's 100 of those little squares in the middle, that means instead of 1/4, we do 100/4 because there's 100 little squares. And that would give us 25 because that is 100 divided by 4. So we color in 25 little squares. So that is 25 little squares for you, or 1/4. Now if I zoom out a little, you might see that I colored in the exact same area, the exact same squares, 25. Well, there you go, that's a similarity. 0.25 and 1/4 mean the exact same thing. But then you ask me, Maths Magician, I can't draw this whole big square and draw 100 squares inside it every time I want to convert decimals and fractions. That would take way too much time. Well, you're right. So I came up with this formula to convert decimals. So let me just clear this out. Okay, so we're working with 0.25 and 1/4. So the first thing when converting decimals to fractions is we have the fraction, just write it as 0.25, which is our fraction right here, over 1. So this over 1, it doesn't change the decimal, it just means 0.25 divided by 1. And if you divide anything by 1, it stays the same. And then that's the first step. The second step is we just write that out again, over 1. And since the rightmost digit or the smallest part of that decimals, which is this 5, then find the place value of that, and that would be the 5 is 100th. And you might see a similarity, like 100th kind of sounds like 100. So all we need to do is multiply it by 100 over 100. So when we multiply the numerator by 100, we have to do the same thing to the denominator. And when we're multiplying it by 100 over 100, we're basically multiplying it by 1, because 100 over 100, 100 divided by 100 is just 1. So when we do that, we get 25 over 100. And there we go. That's the fraction. But wait, this 25 over 100 doesn't look like 1/4 up there. So all we have to do is just simplify it. So 25 divides by 5 and 100 divides by 5. So that would give us 5 over 20. But you can still simplify it. 5 divides by 5 and 20 also divides by 5. That would give us 1 over 4. And there we go. If we go all the way up here, we have 1 over 4 and 1 over 4. So that is how you can convert decimals to fractions. And it's not very hard, it's just 2 little steps. Let's do some examples so you can practice converting decimals to fractions. So question 1. Convert 6.44 to a fraction and leave it as a mixed fraction. Okay, so all we need to do is just write 6.44 over here and divide it by 1, because that is step 1. And then step 2 would be, since the rightmost digit is in the hundreds place, this 4 right over here, we have to multiply it by 100 over 100. And if there was one more digit, that would be 1,000 over 1,000, or one more digit, 10,000 over 10,000, and on and on and on. But for this problem's sake, we do 100 over 100. So that would give us 644 over 100. Now this isn't really simplified, and they want it as a mixed fraction. So we'll do that next. First, we got to simplify it. And 644 we can divide by 4, and 100 we can divide by 4. So that would give us 161 over 25. This, I'm pretty sure, is simplified as we can get. So let's turn it into a mixed fraction. 25 goes into 161 6 times, and there would be 11 left over, so that would be 11 over 25. So that is how we can convert 6.44 to a fraction. Let's move on to question 2. Question 2 says, if 0.56 of the students in a school are girls, and there are 100 students at the school, then write a fraction for the part of the school that consists of girls. What we can make out from this question is the 0.56, the 100, and write as a fraction. Okay, all we have to do is do 0.56, not 51, 56 over 1 as our first step, and then as our second step, we do 0.56 over 1, and usually we would still multiply it by 100 because of this digit over here, which is in the hundreds place. But if they say this number of students, as they've done here, then you just multiply it by 100 because there are 100 students, and then 100 at the bottom too. So when we multiply that out, that would give us 56 over 100. And as always, we always have to simplify, so we can divide the numerator and the denominator by 4, and 100 by 4, which would give us 14 over 25. And I don't think we can simplify it more. So that is the fraction, how much of the school are girls in that particular school. If you enjoyed watching my video and learned how to convert decimals to fractions, then click that shiny red subscribe button. Strike that bell to get notified when I release more fun maths videos. If you have any questions or comments about my video or any other topics that you want my future video to be about, then chuck in the comment box down below. And if you would like to access previous video on decimals, which I talked about earlier in this video, then it's in the description box down below. Thanks for watching, and the Maths Magician will see you later.